All right, Mr. Best, I have 7:30. Let's get started.
Well, welcome to the January 10th Transportation Commission. This is our first meeting of the new year, so Happy New Year. Second, staff would like to welcome our newest member, Julie Evans. Welcome. The first item on the agenda is citizen comment. We have no speakers for citizen comment. Item 2 is the Community Energy Plan. We have a staff VIP here this evening, Rich Dooley. Rich, take it away.
Thank you very much, Mr. Best, and thank you to all the commissioners for your attention tonight and the availability and the chance to give you an update as to what's going on with our community energy plan. A brief bit of background as to who I am. I'm the county's community energy coordinator. I work in Department of Environmental Services in the Office of Sustainability and Environmental Management, and more specifically, I'm on the Rethink Energy team. We are a team of dedicated professionals that are focused on a variety of different energy and sustainability related activities. And as you see from the slide here, we are working on a variety of different initiatives as a roadmap all toward helping the community reach its goals in the community energy plan. As slides? Oh yeah, you see me. Hi. So while that is being addressed, thank you, Mr. Best. Let me provide, once again, a bit of background. The Community Energy Plan, after a 3.5-year effort of technical analysis as well as community engagement, was adopted by the county board in June of 2013. So Jay Fizzette at the time, the board chair in 2010, announced it as his main initiative in 2010. And that carried over into 2011 as a draft community energy plan. And then we went through another round of analysis and due diligence to finalize it, bring it to the board in 2013, and that's not the direction that should go. Oh, okay. Well, we will continue on, and I'll tell you what you could be seeing in just a moment. So when we were in the process of developing the community energy plan circa 2010, the question was why? And we wanted to look back to the 60s and 70s to say, well, there was a time when smart growth wasn't a thing. And in the 60s and 70s, there were very forward-thinking commissioners as well as board members that said, we can go ahead and do smart land use planning and transportation planning, layer those two together into something called smart growth. And lo and behold, you have the result of that through implementation of those plans, and the result is what you see today in a very successful and vibrant Arlington. So in 2010, we recognized that there are a number of different things that are impacting the energy sector, and because of that, we wanted to ensure that we were addressing the energy sector effectively so as to help Arlington do its part in addressing not only climate change issues, but also economics and energy security and resiliency. And so we are layering on energy planning onto that land use and transportation planning that had taken place 30 plus years ago. And so this is a very relatively forward-thinking and transformative plan. It is one of the few energy plans around the country. There aren't many jurisdictions who have gone to this extent to look at energy planning between now and the year 2050. We do have a series of goals and implementation items, and then we'll talk about some of those as well as some of the successes that we've had over the past 5 years. There's been a lot of talk about the energy use throughout the world, and we have a graph that I can refer back to in just a moment. But that graph shows that in the 1800s into the early 1900s, it was fairly static in terms of the energy use worldwide. But then right around the 1950s, things really started to increase in intensity in terms of the energy use around the world. And that was through the use of, there we go, through the use of vehicular use as well as buildings, air conditioning, and so forth. And then you layer onto that all the electronics that we use. Thank you, Mr. Best. It just continues to ramp up that energy use and energy supply. And by the way, this is the very nice map of Arlington showing the smart growth And this is the other slide that you missed that kind of highlights who I am and what the AIR team does in regards to supporting the county and the community in reaching its community energy plan goals. And I'll make this PowerPoint presentation available to Mr. Best to distribute to you afterwards. So with the energy sector going great guns and no end in sight in terms of the energy use dropping around the world, Arlington County said, well, there are opportunities for us to go ahead and take advantage of that increased energy use. And we want to make sure that we're not just sitting by and letting things being dictated to us, but rather we're taking bull by the horns and actually doing something about this. So there are three elements to the community energy plan to help us in our decision making. The first one that I'll tackle is energy security or resiliency. On the lower left-hand side of the screen here is a shot of Manhattan after Hurricane Sandy. There's one rather tall building left of center that's all lit up. And that is an example of a building that, with some forethought, went ahead and put devices in the building to allow it to take natural gas and produce electricity within that building. It has its own power plant, essentially, a combined heat and power plant inside the building. And so that allows for not only productivity, but also it allows for all the systems to be a go in the event of a larger disruption, as happened with the hit of Hurricane Sandy. Now, hurricanes are just one thing that can impact us. We also have the potential for man-made disasters, as well as things like derechos, which come out of nowhere and with no planning and with no forethought or with no advance notice. And so with energy security, it's about keeping the lights on, making sure our infrastructure is intact, and we do the things that we need to do in order to keep the lights on. But in the event that there is an unforeseen circumstance, we go ahead and we make that infrastructure relatively resilient and make it so that it's able to come back up and be running in a short period of time. And so energy security or resiliency is one of the primary lenses through which we make our decisions as we implement the plan. Another one is, how do the economics work? In the 3.5-year effort from 2010 to 2013, we heard from the business sector in particular that was heavily involved in the development of this plan. They asked us, well, who's going to benefit and who's going to pay? And how will this affect the economics? Well, time and again, we look at the energy use throughout the United States as being relatively wasteful compared to the rest of the world. And we're to the tune of wasting $600 billion per year throughout the United States in comparison to places like the European Union and other parts of the world that use energy much more efficiently. And so because of that, we decided there was opportunity there for Arlington County to be more efficient in the way in which we use energy and to help in productivity and to help our tenants, our business owners, and our homeowners in increasing their energy efficiency. Last but not least is environmental commitment. We've had a number of different initiatives, including smart growth, that has helped to address the environment, and we plan to continue to do that by reducing greenhouse gas emissions as a sign of energy productivity. And we have data that will show you that we are on track to go ahead and to address the environment, and we want to continue to do that with a goal of dropping down our greenhouse gas emissions to 3 metric tons per capita per year by the year 2050. In order to do that, we broke energy down into a variety of different components. These are the 6 chapters, if you will. There's 6 goal areas for the community energy plan. It's making buildings, that includes commercial buildings as well as homes, more energy efficient. Renewable energy, that's increasing the use of renewable energy, in particular solar photovoltaics on all buildings. County government operations, it's important for us to lead by example. With education, we recognize education and human behavior is very important because you can't rely just on technologies. You can have the best technologies around, but if somebody walks out of a room and doesn't flip a switch, then you're still burning the energy by keeping the lights on. Transportation. We have a variety of different things that we've worked together with Mr. Best and his colleagues in ensuring that we support the Master Transportation Plan implementation. And last but not least is district energy, which is connecting multiple buildings through the use of underground pipes that carry hot and cold water. And that hot and cold water is able to heat and cool buildings, takes our efficiencies from around 40% efficient up to around 80% efficient, getting back to the economic competitiveness piece once again. So with transportation, overarching goal is to refine and expand the transportation infrastructure and operations enhancements. We've worked together with Dennis Leach. He came to a recent Energy Committee meeting to talk about a variety of things related to the work being done in the Transportation Department and how the MTP is going to mesh and be in concert with the Community Energy Plan as we continue to move forward. So once again, we recognize, and our consultants recognize, as they were doing their work for that 3.5 years with the county, the robust and very successful master transportation plan and the implementation thereof. And they said, continue doing what you're doing and do it faster and do it stronger. And that's what the CEP is all about. With the various sector plans throughout the county, including Crystal City, Courthouse, and in Roslyn, we work together with a variety of staff in CPHD as well as in DES and transportation to ensure the community energy plan ideals are built into those plans, because it's those plans that the community looks to when it comes to redeveloping those areas. We want to ensure that sustainability and the energy plan goals are woven into those things seamlessly. In the plan itself, we did say every 5 years we were going to revisit the community energy plan and see to what extent it needed an update. As it turns out, since 2013, there's been a lot of things in the news that you may have seen, and a lot of things happening in the energy sector that demands for an update to the community energy plan. Our goal is to make that plan current and reflect the energy sector, the marketplace, and to make sure that it is relevant to not only Arlington, but to the rest of the nation and the rest of the world. So with that dynamic energy sector, we're also conducting two things. Those were finished in 2018. One is a greenhouse gas emissions inventory, which I'll provide some results from, as well as an energy model. And an energy model is essentially saying, as we look on into the future, what's feasible for us to go ahead and to do when it comes to the energy sector? And secondly, how are we going to get there? So it means how many electric vehicles, for instance, do we foresee traveling the roads of Arlington over the coming years? So we incorporate that information as well as doing community outreach. We had a community forum on November 5th, just down the road at George Mason University. About 80 people attended that and participated. And during that, we got a lot of really important comments from a variety of different stakeholders and energy experts. And we're incorporating not only those comments, but comments from the Energy Committee, and then any other comments that have come in through our website, where we have a link that people can go ahead and click on 24/7 to go ahead and provide comments on the Community Energy Plan. So with that, here's one of those graphics I was mentioning to you. Look at the dark green line that shows from 2007, which is our baseline. It shows that we've been able to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and this is per capita, so this is taking into account that we've had about an 8% population growth from 2007 to 2016. We've been able to drop our greenhouse gas emissions as a community down to just above 9 metric tons of CO2 per capita per year, and that's a drop of 29%. Is ahead of the pace that we had set out for ourselves, but we do have to recognize that a lot of the low-hanging fruit, a lot of the easy stuff is essentially what's being taken care of here. It's going to become more and more difficult as we head into the out years to try and reach that magical goal of 3.0 by the year 2050. And this is looking at it a little bit differently. This is not taking into account the population, but rather just the gross amount of CO2 emissions in metric tons. And by doing that, it shows that we were able to reduce those gross tonnage down by 24% from 2007 to 2016. But yet again, it is an improvement over where we had set out to be, which is the good news. And once again, the tough news is that it's going to become harder and harder for us to get those advanced gains as we move out into 20 to 2030 and out years. Sorry for the graphic being a little bit squirrely here. Let me go to my hard copy to make sure I get the numbers right. So our population grew of the order of around 10% from 2007 to 2016. Jobs grew by 3%. The number of housing units grew by 12%. So growth in all those areas, and still we were able to drive down our greenhouse gas emissions. The grid emissions were down by 28%, So that means a lot of improvements being done across the grid, and that's by taking coal plants offline and replacing them with natural gas plants in other parts of Virginia. Total energy used in our buildings here in Arlington had dropped 11%, and the total energy used in transportation dropped by 13%. And so that arrow is hiding that, and I'm going, oh, never mind. I was going to try and correct that, but you'll have to trust me. It's down by 13%, and that's done by our greenhouse gas emissions inventory that we can verify that. So what we are doing is we've been at this since 2018 by doing the greenhouse gas emissions inventory, the energy model, and then also working together with consultants to do market research. Our goal is to try and ensure that our energy plan is, again, in concert with that energy sector, but also recognizing that a lot of other folks in the world are moving forward and doing some really interesting things. We want to make sure we incorporate that advancements in technology through the use of market research and incorporating that into our plan as we move forward. So we're in the midst of drafting that community energy plan update, and we anticipate later on this spring to go ahead and go public with it, at which point in time we would welcome and be interested in coming back with details as to the changes that were done to the community energy plan in particular, and then answer any questions or ask for any comments from the commissioners here. And the goal is to go ahead and bring this forward to the county board by the July county board meeting for them to consider and to go ahead and to essentially re-adopt a plan that's already been adopted. It's important to note also this community energy plan, much like the master transportation plan, is part of Arlington County's comprehensive plan. And so it is there for now and on into the future as we redevelop as a community. There's my contact information and the end of the formal presentation. Happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Dooley. Any commissioners have questions or comments? Commissioner Price.
Mr. Dooley, thank you for your presentation. Very much appreciate you coming before us. Just a quick question. Do we have any data from our neighboring jurisdictions on how they're doing in terms of GHG emissions reductions, or does that data exist? Do you have anything to compare how Arlington's doing compared to Montgomery County, District of Columbia, Alexandria, and or Fairfax?
I can tell you without specifics. First of all, the answer is yes. Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, through a variety of different commissions, reach out and ask for data from each of the jurisdictions within COG, and then they have that information, that data available. I can tell you, at looking at it, without being able to tell you the specifics of the data, that Arlington County is doing better than average when it comes to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and being more energy efficient, if you will. And so I can work together with COG officials to get to Mr. Best the details that they have able to release and provide that to this commission. You bet.
Commissioner Lantalmi.
In figuring out our emissions, are these emissions that are generated within the county, or, for example, if we're using electricity that comes from a coal plant in Southwest Virginia, does that get captured by our numbers, or do we just consider electricity as not, that we use here as it's energy that isn't contributing to our CO2 load?
Well, we look at the greenhouse gas emissions that are based on the energy use here in Arlington, but as part of that, we also recognize what's called a grid factor, and it's how clean the energy is that we actually end up using to turn on these lights. So it's a combination thereof. In terms of transportation, we do have vehicle miles traveled in here, and so that 13% reduction in the transportation sector was due to a combination of 10% reduction in vehicle miles traveled, which does include pass-through traffic. So we use protocols that are being used by other jurisdictions all around the country and our consultants, I should say, use those protocols in developing these reports. And they do include that pass-through traffic. Another area that provided that reduction was a slight improvement in the fuel economy of vehicles.
So do we use, for vehicles, are we using for VMT, are we using just a fleet-wide average, national type of average for all types of vehicles? Because as we have a shift from gasoline and diesel to electric, that could presumably change the GHG mix, even with, let's say, the same number of cars.
Right. Having not managed the project in developing the greenhouse gas emissions inventory, I don't have the specifics as to what the protocols have them do, but I'm happy to go ahead and get that information to you afterwards.
Anybody else? Commissioner Mefflin?
Oh, okay. Thank you. I was just curious to know what the energy model means on the project timeline and why is it on the project timeline?
Let me bring up the project timeline. Yep.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry,
The energy model is just curious, like why is it on the project timeline and what do we mean by the energy model?
so we had consultants back in 2010 in developing the community energy plan. We took the greenhouse gas emissions inventory that we had for 2007, and then we said, in the first phase, in developing the community energy plan, we worked together with a task force of 29 individuals from a variety of sectors and organizations, met once every 2 months, and in doing so, we provided a lot of background information on energy planning. Part of the information was benchmarking. So we benchmark the world to find out who was doing energy planning successfully. As it turned out, we looked at Copenhagen, Denmark, as the leader when it came to greenhouse gas emissions. And they were at 3.0 metric tons per capita per year. So at that point in time, the task force asked staff and consultants to go ahead and to develop a plan to get us to 3.0 in comparison to just under 13 was our greenhouse gas emissions and CO2 emissions, I should say, in 2007. So to get from around 13 down to 3.0, again, there are a number of different areas to look at, and it was simply to say, how are we going to get from where we are in 2007 out to 3.0 in 2050? And that's going to take a number of different things. And so what they did is they looked at the energy efficiency in 2007 of the buildings in Arlington. And they said, if we increase the energy efficiency year over year on average out to the year 2050, we will gain this much in a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and so on and so forth. How much renewable energy do we need to add? 160 megawatts of renewable energy by the year 2050. And just went ahead and did that modeling to drop us down to 3.0. So the modeling, in essence, helped us to understand what our path was forward and what we would have to implement between now and 2050 in order to reach our targets. So the energy modeling, getting back to where we are here, is taking a little bit different tact, and it's simply to say we recognize 3.0 was our goal before, but we also want to incorporate market research and the background as to what's going on around the world and the advancements in technologies and the price drops in things like solar photovoltaics. And is 3.0 the right number, or are we actually feasibly able to do better than that as a community and stay viable across our three lenses of economics, energy security, and environmental commitment? And so we will provide that update in the springtime and be able to have you go ahead and comment on where we landed.
Commissioner Yeri.
Hi, thank you for the presentation.
Sure.
I'm sorry, this might sound a little bit blunt. Is there any concern that the 2050 target year is going to be a little bit too late?
The 2050 target year. Even though we're being ambitious and transformative, we also have to be realistic about what we're capable of doing, given that we're a Dillon's Rule state and there are a number of other things that we're facing. And so we are trying to push forward and address energy matters and recognize that we can't just sit idly by and expect others to go ahead and do it. We're, I guess, putting our stake in the sand and saying this is what we have to do. And then it is up to the community. If the community thinks that we need to be that much more ambitious, transformative, and more strident in our goals, we would want to hear from the community about that.
Thank you.
You bet.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Dilly.
Thank you.
Item 3, the General Assembly update. This item, the staff member is actually not available, so we will have this in February. Moving on to 4, this is the Education Center Reuse Project Use Permit, and this is an information item, and I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Good evening, Commissioners. I want to introduce myself. My name is Ben Bergen. I'm the Assistant Director of Design and Construction with Arlington Public Schools. I want to offer our thanks to the Commission for hearing our item this evening. It is every project we do is an important project to meet the needs of our community and our students. And this one's a little unique in that we are repurposing an existing asset. So it has some interesting characteristics. Our presentation we'll have 2 parts. Jim Spearman with Studio 27 will give you a very brief project overview and talk about the timeline. And then Rob Scheisel with Grove Slade will sort of walk you through some of their analysis that they've done developing the multimodal transportation analysis. Okay. And I'm going to walk across the room so I can run the slides, but I'll be available, and our entire team will be for questions. So, Jim, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Can you turn your microphone on, please? Thank you.
How's that? Okay. Thank you for having us. I'm Jim Spearman with Studio 27 Architecture. We're the architects for the Education Center Reuse Project. We're delighted to be here and working with Arlington Public Schools in Arlington County on the project. Ben, can you go to the first slide? We just have a brief orientation. The project location, you see the map before you where you probably all know where Washington Lee High School is. The Arlington Education Center is a building that is on that campus between North Quincy, North Stafford, Washington Boulevard, and I-66. And it's part of a campus that includes the Education Center, the planetarium, Washington Lee High School, and the parking deck that is over 66. It's an important part of the Washington Lee facility. Next slide. Our project timeline, we got started in September of 2018. We've had now 4 BLPC PFRC meetings during our schematic design process. We've had a community forum in early December in which we had a sort of gallery walk-around format presentation. And we expect to go for school board approval of schematic design in February of 2019. You'll see that the school board has also approved the educational specifications for the project, which is an important part of measuring how the schematic design achieves the teaching and learning goals of the project. We expect to go before the county board in early 2019 for the use permit application, and we'll keep going and try to open the school by September of 2021. Next slide. The scope of the project is to renovate the Education Center to both increase the capacity of Washington Lee initially and later to adapt possible future instructional and grade level changes, addressing capacity by providing 500 to 600 high school seats, supporting the APS strategic plan goals specifically for healthy, safe, and supported students. Our timeline is, as you just heard, we're in schematic design now. We're anticipating county board approval of the use permit in spring of this year and opening by the start of school in 2021. The cost of the project is included in the FY 2019 to 28 capital improvement plan, and it's to spend a maximum project cost of $37 million, using every effort to spend less. And so that's kind of orientation, location, timeline, and project description. And now my colleague Rob Scheisel from Grove Slade is here to talk with us about the MMTA.
Thanks. I'm going to give a rather quick summary of what's in the MMTA and what we've been up to as well. We've been thinking through the transportation planning on this project. I'm going to start just with a little bit of context and go through the major topics that we've had, the traffic, parking, and arrival dismissal at the school, and kind of give you an idea of what the general timeline is and the next steps as we're going through it. At a big picture level, just from transportation-wise, this is somewhat just a direct building swap, a swap of uses in a building. It's an office building, it's now being converted to handle up to 600 new students. So on a big level, there's just a different type of activities being common in the same building. So we wanted to get an idea of, big picture-wise, what the major changes are. Traffic-wise, swapping an office building for a school generally reduces overall traffic, but it'll peak a little bit more in the morning, have a little bit less in the commuter peak just because of the way different schools are. Overall, not a huge change. Same with parking. An office building of this size and this many students generally generates about the same amount of parking, and that's what we have found as we've gone through our analysis. The major difference, and where a lot of the discussion and almost every recommendation that's in our draft MMTA lies, is in just the arrival and dismissal. The main difference between a school and other uses is the pickup and drop-off of parents, the school buses, the additional pedestrian activity crossing Quincy Street and other streets that we're going to find that you didn't get in what the office building used to be. So big picture, those are the major changes going on the site, and that's what we really targeted, and as in the MMTA, that's where almost all the recommendations lie. So quickly going to traffic operations. Our traffic models of the study area showed mostly acceptable conditions along Stafford Street, Quincy Street, and other streets, with the levels of service being within acceptable thresholds. The major exceptions to that, or a couple exceptions to that, is that mainly during the morning peak hour, side street traffic on Quincy Street has long delays. Quincy Street has one travel lane in each direction, but it does have a lot of traffic in the morning. It's actually kind of equal in both directions. There's not a lot of gaps, and if you're a car just trying to turn at an unsignalized intersection, it's a little difficult, and that's what our traffic models show. The existing and future traffic models, almost the same. They're not that much variation. There's actually, the change of adding a school versus an office building really isn't that much to move the dial that much in an area that already has the amount of traffic around here. Our MMTA talks about, and it does investigate a few of the ways to provide extra vehicular capacity to address these issues, but in the end doesn't recommend any. They're either not worth the detrimental impact to other modes or not really fit the context or have really a benefit just to alleviate delays. I'll move on to parking. Just want to orient you to the site's parking lots. There's a couple surface lots on site, 2 visitor lots, one outside the Washington Lee front door, and another visitor lot kind of in between where the pool and the planetarium are on the North Quincy side. And then where the Ed Center is, there's a large surface lot that is currently closed off to any public use or use. It's used for storage right now. And then, as Jim said, there is a multi-level garage over I-66 that holds has a few hundred spaces. That garage is broken off into different areas. Currently, one area is for public use, one area is dedicated for student use, and the rest are signed for Washington Lee or education center use, basically APS use. And that is, as opposed to other school sites, it's a little bit different here just because usually you don't have a multi-level garage with a couple hundred spaces on it. And that was a resource when kind of looking at the campus as a whole here. And there's on-street parking also that we included in our analysis. I would point out a couple things here. In the dark blue, you see around 100 spaces that are unrestricted and right next to the spot. These are mostly spaces not in front of homes that are currently unrestricted. They get used by the campus uses, as I'll show in a second. Then along Quincy Street, in the yellow there, you see time restricted. That's metered parking. That's metered parking that has hourly restrictions, kind of preventing free parking and also preventing commuter parking along that stretch. So we took parking counts for every 30 minutes for all throughout the day. I'm showing here an example of what 10:30, what the parking demand was. The parking garage and the unrestricted parking that I just kind of pointed out get pretty full in the middle of the school day. What doesn't get utilized during the school day as much is the metered parking, which I just discussed about on Quincy Street. Generally, when you get into the residential neighborhoods, they look typical. In the middle of the day, there's parking available, pretty much correlates to how many houses have driveways or so. But the key here is that most of the parking is currently getting full, and the couple resources aren't full at all is one, the APS Education Center lot that is closed off right now, and the parking along Quincy Street. So we did an analysis, looked at survey results, data, what we just talked about, the observations, and the actual counts of parking, extrapolated what it would mean to add 600 new students to the school, how much based on the extra staff and the extra students parking would be, and we found that if you simply reopened the lot that's being used for storage right now at the Education Center, you would have enough parking spots to accommodate the increase of students on campus. In fact, you'd have more than you needed, just at a easy extrapolation. So we made a recommendation that open just that number of spaces, if possible, and then continue the TDM program that's already going on at the school through APS Go as kind of a cushion. We said, instead of saying open up the whole lot, we're kind of recommending only open up as much as you need to, and then you could possibly repurpose some spaces for other needs. As far as visitor parking is, there's currently, the numbers show that there's enough parking, but through our project, we've learned that because of security in the middle of the day, visitors to the school are almost preferring to park on the street instead of parking in the lot that's near the planetarium, because it's a long walk to the only door that visitors are allowed to go into. So we don't know exactly what the security is going to be when the campus reopens with the Ed Center. So it's just a recommendation to look into wherever the security doors are. You might need to re-sign some parking allocated towards staff or students to kind of match that up better, so that visitors don't have to, because they're not right now, walking all the way around the campus and the buildings to get to their spot. A little similar, we found, we took parking data way up into the evening, and we found that some areas of the parking garage at after-school activities are empty, whereas other areas of parking garage are full, and a lot of on-street parking gets full at after-school activities. So we're recommending some more marketing of the availability of those spaces in the garage, changes to signing appropriate with trying to help people find those instead of circling around looking for on-street parking when there's a resource nearby. It's not exactly the easiest or signed the friendliest for people to know that that's a resource they could be using. In addition to counting all the parking, vehicular parking, we actually did half-hour sweeps of all the bike parking on campus to get an idea of how the students and the other staff and visitors are filling up and using the bike parking during the day. We use that to develop an estimate of what the needs would be. There's enough bike parking to accommodate a population increase, but we are recommending another reservoir of bike parking be added closer to the Education Center. We put a number on that in the report. Since this is a reuse, normally we would recommend, if it was a new building, looking at in upgrading staff parking or having a staff parking in the building and some other resources. It's a little tough in a reuse, but we're exploring ways to get improvements to staff parking, a room, maybe some shower facilities if it has to be in conjunction with the pool that's on site. And even for students, there's currently no covered parking for students, and there isn't one that we could put right next to it, to the building, either the Washington Lee building or the Education Center building, but we're considering putting some in the garage, because you could, in the bottom level of the garage, you could put some covered bike parking. We're not sure if students would use it. It's not visible, it's a longer walk, but I think it's probably worth something. You could convert a space or two with racks temporarily just to see if it works and then monitor it. And if it tends to be used, it could be a pretty good resource to, even on rainy days, to make sure students are still continuing to cycle in. So as far as arrival and dismissal times, if you currently go out to the campus and go onto the Stafford Street side, where the front door to Washington Lee is, in the morning and the afternoon, it is generally a quiet road, but during 20 minutes in the morning and the evening, there's a certain dance of activity that you see at pickup, drop-off, school bus, everything. It goes from quiet to a choreographed dance. Well, it's a dance. Part of it isn't choreographed. Some of it's a little chaotic. And as all those students come in and out of the current high school. We're recommending, after looking at a bunch of options, we're recommending supplementing what currently goes on in Stafford with another area that accommodates all those types of activities along Quincy Street where the Education Center is. Part of this is just adding more of that activity to Stafford would be too much for that just one side of the campus to have. Plus, this is a little bit of a walk and a distance from there. We also wanted to have the ability, although we're analyzing mostly under the assumption that the Education Center is going to act as an expansion of Washington Lee. We have a secondary goal of, if in the far future becomes a little bit different, maybe a school with different bell times or different population, even if it's still just 500 to 600 high school students, it's separated, it could have its own. So we wanted to have a supplemental area to help relieve what's going on in Stafford, and also the option to have an independent if needed, with building a little flexibility. So hence we led to recommendation of putting facilities that handle the arrival and dismissal close to the ed school, or the ed center in the school that would go in there. So this includes looking at putting some extra bus parking where the drive aisle is, repurposing some of that metered parking so that it's signed similar to how some parking is signed on Stafford today, so it could be used for arrival and dismissal, for parents picking up and dropping off, and at the same time used for time-restricted parking in between those and outside those times. And at the same time, we anticipate, there will be more pedestrian activity crossing Quincy. The third reservoir of bike parking that we're recommending is going to be around this area close to the school. So, as I said, our report, a lot of the recommendations focus on making this area and this activity efficient and minimizing the impacts it has. There's a bunch of options that we looked at, all of which are in our draft report, and most of our recommendations, the major recommendations are looking at how the bike lane on Quincy Street is marked and putting in some enhancements there to help create enhanced visibility. Looking at the crossings across Quincy, we didn't think that the current crossing at 14th Street in Quincy was adequate for the expected increase in student activity. So after looking at options, we're recommending a rapid flash beacon be installed there to help driver compliance. So for that at arrival and dismissal, and especially during afternoons and evenings with the after-school activities time, that the crossings could be accommodated. And also, schools have a monitoring plan as they come through. We're recommending that evaluating how these solutions and how everything explicitly on North Quincy Street works is revisited with these monitoring plans, looking at driver compliance rate at the crosswalk, looking at how pickup and drop-off works along Quincy, and adjusting as needed. We're specifically recommending that, in addition to other recommendations as far as arrival and dismissal procedures, having APS staff out there trying to enforce what's in the student handbook as far as what's permitted and not at arrival and dismissal, which is what goes on currently at Washington Lee on Stafford Street. So looking at how the design team incorporated some of these transportation recommendations, the design is split into, and correct me if I'm wrong, a base and an alternative scope. The base we know is in the budget, and the alternative is, does it exceed the budget?
We're carrying it as an alternate.
Yeah, carrying it as an alternative. So in the base scope, it includes, if you could see where the bus drop-off was in the last one, creating a nicer sidewalk there to facilitate queuing of people on and off of, it's currently some parking spots mostly there. And all the recommended improvements on Quincy Street are included in the base alternative. If you go to the alternate scope, takes upon the idea when we had that recommendation that you don't have to reopen every parking spot, and explores what you could do with that extra space. And it includes a multi-use court and some open space where there is currently some asphalt. So as I mentioned several times today, there is a draft report. It's been, APS is currently reviewing it, and as soon as that's ready, that'll be sent around, it'll be distributed and put on the project website, and then we'll gather all those comments and finalize it. We have an upcoming committees meeting on the 23rd. We'll be presenting some of these final recommendations, including some of the architectural refinements that have been going on. The school board has schematic design approval coming up, and towards the end, as we get closer and closer, we'll be refining and reviewing all the use permit recommendations that are transportation related based on all the feedback we receive from everybody. I think that's it. Okay.
Thank you very much. Does staff have a presentation as well, or anything to add?
We do not.
Okay. All right, on to commission questions. Commissioner Calkins?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I have been TC's representative through the process. Could you explain to TC, because I'm sure it's going to be of interest to many commissioners, the treatment that you're planning for the bike lane, pickup drop-off? I'm still concerned that there isn't a preferred alternative that brings the bike lane protected from the drivers. At least it wasn't presented this evening, because I know at the previous meeting, you still had parents crossing the bike lane to drop off their students.
Oh yeah, we looked through several options there. It is having a, well, you know, when you go to a complete street, multimodal streets, one of the things that happens is the modes have to play with each other, and hopefully they play nice with each other. In a lot of urban areas, drivers, cyclists are kind of used to it. We work in the district a lot, and there's a lot of schools in the district that have bike lanes and curbside lanes. And in fact, there's bike lanes next to curbside use all the time. Metered parking, pickup drop-off, Ubers, Lyfts, everything. They don't exactly play nice together all the time. Same way bus stops and bike lanes don't play nice together, really. So knowing that it's not as common here, we explored several ways to enhance maybe the appearance or make it so it's more, create a little bit more awareness between the cyclists and the drivers of what's going on here, so that the activity can happen in an efficient and safe way. It's everything from moving the bike lane to the other side of the street, creating a two-way cycle track, to flipping the curbside parking and the bike lane, to what we're showing here, which is enhanced green paint and other markings. I shouldn't add, there's other things like currently school zone beacons and other things that exist today that are still remaining. We did show at a committee meeting an alternative that did have a buffered lane where they reversed and the enhanced markings. Both are shown in our draft report. And we've discussed implementation. Our report recommends either. They're shown as both ones that would reduce impact. The base option does not include option 1, which is what I talked about tonight, the green paint. Does not include moving the bike lane behind the parking. So I think that answers what, I mean, we didn't dismiss the second one. It's still included in our report, but the base, what's been costed out as the base alternative includes option 1, which is what I discussed.
Thank you. Commissioner Wadsworth?
Hi, sorry, I have a very basic question. I'm not familiar with this. I've never been to the school. What is this building and what is it becoming? What is this project all about?
I'll handle that one. So the facility on site, the APS Education Center, was where our central office staff primarily existed up until about May of 2018. So it was an office building that served sort of departmental staff, you know, non-school-based staff. We've vacated the building. In May of last year, we consolidated our staff at Sequoia building at the intersection of Washington Boulevard and Route 50, which left this building vacant. And the board had made a decision to reuse the facility and transform it into a school. So we're switching from an office use to a school use. And the board has specifically said that when the facility opens in 2021, it will serve as an extension to W&L High School, at least initially. But they've given us direction that we've passed on to the design team to consider that the future use of the facility may change. So it could be something else. So that's why you heard Rob sort of discuss about, you know, what-if scenarios if it became more of an independent facility.
Commissioner Clement?
I like this project. I think it's a much better use of limited APS funds than some of the other projects that I've seen, which I would characterize as white elephants. This seems to be a nuts and bolts project to make the best use of some very valuable space, and I really do like that. I also like the emphasis on finding more to put in bike-friendly throughways and more space for parking bikes. I think that's a great idea. But there's two areas of abuse within the APS system that I think that the transportation planner is catering to, and that is the expectation of staff that they will get to work by car rather than some alternate means, and also the reliance of parents on dropping their kids off at school. And both of those habits or customs derogate from Arlington's car-free diet, which is supposedly our policy. And I realize that the APS is doing this because it wishes to cater to, it has to cater to teachers in order to maintain academic performance. And also it wishes to cater to the parents because they're the source of votes to get reelected. I understand that, but we have to take the situation in hand. This is one of the most congested areas of the county. It is well served by public transit. The buses that we currently have are riding empty, both school buses and art buses. We need to, in my opinion, direct some of our dollars to perhaps an outreach campaign. We cannot force people to change their habits. I understand that too. But we do have something called a PTA system. We even have a council of PTAs. And I'm throwing this out as a suggestion only, that we use our PTAs to conduct an outreach campaign to discourage parents from dropping kids off at school and encourage staff to take alternate means of transportation.
Commissioner, wow. My apologies. Commissioner Weinstein.
Thank you, Chairman Slatt. Just a couple questions about restricted parking. So it looks like 13th and 14th Street has the residential parking permit program. What are the hours for that? And what are the hours for the drop-off in the morning?
Off the top of my head, I do not remember what the residential permit parking times are on 13th and 14th, and I don't know if I have our raw data that has that. For reference, for the arrival and dismissal, currently on Stafford Street for the high school, it's restricted between 7 and 8, or no, 7:30 to 8, I believe, and around 2:30 to 3:15. It's a short window, and that's what we would envision a similar restriction on Quincy Street.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great, because I know in other parts of the neighborhood, it's 9 to 5, and if it's 9 to 5 and drop-off is before 9, I think there could be some concerns about overflow parking during drop-off.
Yeah, I mean, it's, when we put it up on the diagrams, it somewhat oversimplifies it. A bit of, like, if you go to Stafford Street, you'll see a lot of parents in the official queue, but you also see a lot just pulling over to where there's on-street availability and their kid gets out and they move on. And that, kind of disperses. You'll see even some of that today on the Quincy Street side or even on the Washington Boulevard side, just where it is, just because it's convenient. So not everything's as neatly, lined up as we show it, and we kind of anticipate some of that might occur. But no, it's a good point.
Other commissioner questions or comments? Commissioner Lantami.
I was thinking about when you're figuring out the anticipated parking needs in the future, is it too soon, or do we have enough data or even a gut feel for what the impact is going to be for the increased use of scooters and bikes, e-bikes that are not tethered to the capital bike shares? And how that would impact on, because 16-year-olds can use the scooters and presumably could use those to and from school.
I would think they do, evidenced on how many scooters I saw walking around the site when I was there doing observations. There's not a lot of, our industry doesn't have a ton of data showing what happens. We talk around the office about impacts and stuff. We see that those type of, like the scooters, are probably not affecting the mode split of transit and drivers as much as they would walkers and bikers. Currently, like in 9th and 10th grade students on the last APS Go calculation and surveys were showing 7% walk, 29% bike, 19% dropped off. And the seniors a little, 11th and 12th a little bit different, a little bit less drive because some of them drive. They're 3% walk, 24% bike. So those are pretty heavy uses. A little bit higher than the general APS average for high school students. So I would imagine that third of the student population is already, or if that's where the growth would occur, more of a shift.
Just a clarification, well, it doesn't mean they don't use them. You have to be 18 to use a jump bike or cab.
I thought it was a driver's license,
It is not, it's 18.
18. No, thank you.
So that doesn't mean they don't use them. I've seen, I live 2 blocks away, and I've seen 3 of them on one at one time, which is scary.
My neighborhood.
Any other questions or comments? I just want to echo Commissioner, yeah, tonight is not my night for anything. I just want to echo Commissioner Culkin's concerns about the bike lane and drop-off and pickup. I'm really, just because bike lanes exist next to drop-off and pickup other places doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying to do better. I don't think green paint's enough. I've experienced far too many school drop-off and pickup scenarios myself to think that paint is enough to help your average frazzled parent during drop-off to pay proper time and attention to the people around them. So I would encourage you to, if at all possible, move into the base scenario, something that at least has separation on that side of the street. I understand that it's a big lift to get protected bike lanes all the way up and down Quincy or on both sides of Quincy or anything like that, but I think at least at where drop-off and pickup is going to be, I would be far more comfortable, especially with the notion that this school may not be a high school in the future, but something with even younger kids, or even high school age kids that are coming directly to this building intentionally in the future, if those bikes were conflicting with pedestrians crossing the bike lane, not cars crossing the bike lane. Commissioner Price.
I want to echo comments from 2 commissioners, Commissioner Slatt, Chairman Slatt, as well as Commissioner Clement. Thank you. You hit the nail on the head in a lot of your comments. As far as I'm concerned, APS, I'm glad you didn't come with a request for a whole lot of additional parking. Kind of a weird plan in terms of bicycle access. I'm hoping you can rectify that or resolve that at the community level. Because as far as I'm concerned, APS is kind of on a short string when it comes to dealing with what I understand, because you've had a whole lot of, how do I say this, I think problematic projects, even, starting with the new Stratford school, the Ham school, whatever it's going to be called these days. But, and the disaster, as far as I'm concerned, with the drop-off and pick-up new road that's being created there. So your track record so far has not been good. I think with this body, I don't want to speak for everybody else around it, but we've heard some pretty bad ideas come from APS. So I'm glad about this, and I'm hoping there can be improvements made. And look forward to a more concrete plan, because I don't know, I haven't been involved with the whole process. I'd like to see some more detail. And but my wife says I should grant extra parking to any developer who will buy my daughter's Girl Scout cookies. So there's that.
Any last words? I do want to say I think this conversation would have benefited from some additional briefing materials. This information was really light, lacking even stuff that was shown to PFRC, and so therefore must exist already in slide form. So in the future, at the info item level, some more materials so the commission is not asking, what is this project actually even about in the first place, would be appreciated. Thank you.
Item 5 is actually an announcement. The county has started the Lee Highway Plan. This is a land use and transportation plan from right north of Roslyn to Falls Church. This is a little bit different than our typical area or sector plans. Typically, we do an area or sector more, around a metro station or around an area within the county, but this is a corridor of view. With that, we have a consultant team on board as of about a month ago. They are working on a sort of a existing conditions report, and public meetings will start, I was told they start actually early in 2019, but I believe it's last part of January, February, in which we will have our kickoff meeting. So with that, the commission will be, engaged in this, and will have at least one member, if not two. Yep, and I think Mr. Price is involved in this? Yes. Yes. Okay. So I guess stay tuned, and we'll probably have some sort of quarterly briefings on this from the staff that's involved in this effort.
Yes, apparently Commissioner Culkins has a question.
Who's the transportation firm doing the analysis?
Oh, it's AECom.
Okay.
Yeah, and with, it's AECom based here in Arlington and Clarendon.
Who's the PM? Is it Jason?
Jason is on the team.
Sorry, super detailed questions.
Brought to you by Inside Baseball.
With that, it is a very comprehensive team. The actual, I met so many people, and I'm sort of an advisor to this. I'm not directly involved, but certainly I met so many people at AECom in the Clarendon office that I can't imagine they all work there, but they claim they do.
Does good work. They have a really big Arlington
They're doing
team.
more than just the transportation, they're doing the whole thing, right?
They are doing the whole thing.
The whole
I
plan,
mean,
the whole land use part. They are the consultant. They're going to have subs. I don't know who their subs are.
In fact, Charlie Denny, a former staff member and a commission member, is their bike sub. So also Arlington resident who lives near Lee Highway.
Former bike ped manager, if I recall correctly.
And former commission member before that. So it's nice to have sort of an Arlington team.
All right.
Our next item, and probably the most important of the evening, is the TC 2019 schedule. And you'll see in your packet a rather unique 2019 calendar. And how all this works, the county board establishes the date, and the county board date is shown in yellow. And then we sort of back out of that to what I call the Planning Commission week, and that is shown in blue. So the Planning Commission is roughly 2 weeks starting on the Monday. And then, of course, Transportation Commission is typically the Thursday before the Planning Commission Monday. So that would have meetings, of course, on January 10th, our first meeting, followed by the February meeting on February 7th. Our March meeting actually would follow in February 28th. April meeting would be April 4th. May would be May 2nd. The June meeting is actually on May 30th, and the July meeting is on June 27th. And then we get sort of the summer off and start back after the holiday in September 5th, and then October 3rd and 30th, and the final meeting for the year would be on November 25th. So with that, that is the staff proposed schedule. Obviously, we can't argue about January 10th too much.
I do just want to note, if you put the early draft calendar into your calendar, the only change you might need to correct is the July meeting moving to June 27th. That had been in early July, in a very early draft of this calendar.
So in the general rule of thumb, it's the Thursday before the Monday Planning Commission. However, there is an exception to that rule. If you look at October, we're going to have this on October 30th, a Wednesday, because of Halloween, and November the 25th, and not on Thanksgiving.
Is there a motion to adopt the calendar? Is there a second? Any discussion? Commissioner Hester would like to discuss the schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be abstaining from this vote.
That makes a lot of sense. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstention? All right. Well, that's our next item of business. Commissioner Hester is moving out of Arlington County. We are sad to see him go. I thank him for his excellent service and excellent attendance on the commission, and wish him well in Fairfax County. Where? What? Please.
So yes, I am moving to Tyson's Corner with Tyson's. My wife and I both work in the area, and this will save us probably add 6 hours back into our week. Plus, I don't want to have another car on 66, add an emission. So I will say that, yeah. I will say that I love this county. I've been very grateful to be a part of this commission. Just want to thank particularly staff, particularly you, Mr. Best, for your professionalism and support. And also want to thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, whether it's a politically hot topic or the most mundane minutia in a staff report this thick, you are always objective and focused on the long-term health of this county. And, you know, you always have order on this commission, and you always have patience. I have seen citizens come up to that panel and personally attack you, and you haven't treated them any differently than any other speaker. And so while commissioners like me come and go, it'll be a sad day for this county when you are not on this commission. So I will end my term on that note.
Anything else, Mr. Best?
The only other item I had, we did get a request from Commissioner Clemens about an I-66 HOV violation, to have someone from VDOT to give us an overview. Certainly that could be scheduled for sometime February or March, or that first quarter.
Yes, I support that request. Let's get together offline and
I don't need to burden you with it tonight, but I do have some additional information. I'm a member of the Arlington Coalition for Sensible Transportation, and we've actually gotten some citation statistics from Virginia State Police. They're actually the enforcers. I don't know if you want to talk to them or VDOT or them through VDOT. It's a bit of a complicated arrangement, but I have some additional statistics.
yeah, please send them my way.
All right.
Anything else, anybody from PFRC, SPRC, Bicycle Advisory, Transit Advisory, Pedestrian Advisory, anything, task forces? All right, then we are adjourned.
Great, have a good evening.
But I am open for business for Girl Scout cookies if you need.